welcome to the CEC lectures on endocrinology series. Myself, Dr. Amrita Bakshi from Ramjas College, University of Delhi, and I would be dealing with a series of lectures on the field of endocrinology. So before beginning with today's lecture, let me give you an overview about this field and how we are going to move in our series of lectures. So in today's part, we will have a brief overview about the field of endocrinology, wherein you will get to learn about the hormones and their types. In the next part of the series, you will get to know about the hormone receptors and their mechanism of action. Subsequently, in rest of the series, we will focus on each and every endocrine gland, the structure of the gland, function of the gland, the hormone which is produced, how it is being synthesized, released, and what are the physiological actions of that hormone. So this is how we are going to move in this series. So let us start with today's lecture and introduction. So you must have seen around yourself some unicellular organisms. They do not have brain, but still they can sense the changes in their surroundings. They can sense the food. They can sense any change in pH or temperature. And not only they sense, they also respond. So definitely there is some system which is there even in unicellular organisms. If we talk about multicellular organisms, let us take humans only, we have not only this sensing system in our body, other than this we have nervous system also. So inside our body there are primarily nervous system and endocrine system which regulates and control and coordinate various activities within our body. So this endocrine system along with the nervous system interacts with the immune system to control and coordinate various activities of our body. But before dwelling into endocrine system, we need to understand the basic differences or similarities between these two systems which control and coordinates the activities. So the nervous system primarily works via neurotransmitters which are released in response to some of the nerve impulses, whereas the endocrine system basically deals with the hormones about which we are going to talk in short. So after that, we generally observe that nervous system, the neurotransmitters which are a component of nervous system, they act close to the site, generally in the synaptic spaces present between two adjacent neurons. Whereas these hormones generally, I am using the term generally, they generally act a bit far from the release of their site. The target cells in case of nervous system is generally muscle. Other than muscle, there are gland cells or other neurons which act as the target cells for the nervous system. For the endocrine system, we observe that hormones basically enter and circulate throughout our body, and hence the target cells of endocrine system are spread throughout our body. Very importantly, the nervous system, basically the neurotransmitters which are a component of nervous system, they typically work within milliseconds. So the action is quite quick for nervous system. But for the endocrine system, the action of hormones vary. It may act in seconds, it may act in hours, or even in days. The other thing is that the duration of action of neurotransmitters is very quick. It's for a briefer duration. But the hormones generally take longer duration to act. Some of the hormones may act within seconds also, but some may take several hours to even days. And when you will learn about this field, you will see that there are several processes within our body wherein the quick responses are not required. And there the significance of endocrine system can be seen. So, who were the discoverers of this field of endocrinology? Earlier, before 1900s, it is observed that it was accepted the concept of nervism was there, wherein it was believed that only neural regulation is there, which regulates, controls, and coordinates various bodily activities. The experiments conducted by Ernst Starling and William Bayliss showed that not only nervous regulation is there, but there is chemical regulation as well. So they performed an experiment wherein what they did, they disrupted the gastric nervous supply, and they were expecting that now pancreas would not be able to secrete its secretions when the food will enter the duodenum. But to their surprise, they observed that pancreas did release even after disrupting this nervous supply. So this basically suggested that apart from neural regulation, there is implication of some chemicals as well. And that laid the foundation of discipline of endocrinology. And this experiment basically led to the discovery of the first hormone, which is secretin. The term endocrinology, the term hormone, was also given by Starling. So now we are in a state to understand the field of endocrinology. So basically, endocrinology deals with the study of endocrine glands as well as hormones. So endocrine glands, we are all aware that glands are the group of cells. So these are the tissues which would be secreting something. So primarily there are three types of glands, including exocrine glands, endocrine glands, and heterocrine glands. I'm sure you might have an idea about the endocrine glands, which are actually the ductless glands. So these glands produces and secretes hormones. The term hormone is basically derived from a Greek word hormone, which means that to stimulate or to excite or to arouse any cell. So classically, it was believed that hormones are actually the chemical substances which are produced and released by certain specialized tissues, which we refer as endocrine glands. And these chemical substances are secreted into the blood. And from blood, they will be carried to the target organs. As per this classical definition, certain chemicals were excluded, such as the ectohormones. What are ectohormones? Ectohormones basically traverse through some external medium, including air or water, and thereby helping in interacting between two individuals. So generally ectohormones are seen in the insect species, and it includes pheromones, which are the sexual attractants, the gameons, which are the inducers of sexual development, elomones and chiromones, which are interspecies attractants. So as per the classical definition which we have just discussed here, these ectohormones had been included. So we have to reach to some of the more functional definition, because with the discovery of this field and a number of advancements, it was got to know that hormones not necessarily be secreted in the blood, and hence a more functional definition has been now proposed, which says that a hormone is a chemical but a non-nutrient chemical. It is an intracellular messenger and is effective at micromolar concentrations or even less. It will carry information between two or more cells, because the basic role of hormone is to act as a messenger. So whenever the hormone action is studied at the cellular or molecular level, there is a name or a terminology given, which is molecular endocrinology. And by now, I'm sure you have understood that endocrine system works along with the nervous system, and this has given rise to another field of endocrinology, which is neuroendocrinology, which studies relation between nervous and endocrine system. So now let's talk about the hormones bit in detail. So hormones, as I was telling you, that as per classical definition, these are secreted into the bloodstream. So there would be some cells, some secretory cells which would be synthesizing the hormones and secreting them in the bloodstream. Through this circulation, now these hormones would reach to a number of cells, but only those cells which would be having the receptors specific to that hormone would be able to respond. So these hormones will thereafter bind to the receptors, their specific receptors, and will elicit the physiological action. Other than these circulating hormones, we now know that hormones may act in a paracrine manner also, and even in the autocrine manner. The hormone may not need be secreted in the blood. So let us take an example of a paracrine or an autocrine hormone. So in this figure you can observe that there is a cell which is producing interleukin 2. Now this interleukin 2 is acting on the adjacent cells. That means a paracrine mode of action. Also, in this part you can see that interleukin 2 is also acting on the cell itself, which is leading to the proliferation of this cell. So you can see here that this cell has been proliferated by the response received from one of the cells of the same kind, and it is in parallel also acting on other cell type. So interleukin 2, which you are aware is a cytokine, is also a local hormone. Other than this, you should know that NO, which is the gaseous hormone, nitric oxide, it also acts in a local manner, which will help in vasodilation and erection of the penis. So in this figure you can see that one of the way is that hormone can enter into the blood circulation. But you need to keep in mind that even these neurons which are secreting some chemical messengers, you can say neurotransmitters or neurohormones in the synapse, and stimulating the adjacent neuron is also a part of hormone. Also, you should know that neurons do secrete these hormones in the blood circulation also. You will get to know about each and every example when we would be talking about these in detail in our further series. This figure on the right is again telling about the auto and paracrine action of the hormones. So now you have an idea that hormones can enter into the circulation, but the hormones can even act in an autocrine or a paracrine manner. So now we should understand that what are the chemical classes of the hormones. So broadly, there are two chemical classes of the hormones. The first one is water-soluble hormones, which have been further classified into these categories reflected on your screen. You can see that water-soluble hormones includes eicosanoids. These eicosanoids includes prostaglandins and leukotrienes. Then there are some peptide hormones like oxytocin, antidiuretic hormone. Then there are some protein hormones including insulin. And if the carbohydrate moieties get attached to these protein hormones, then it gives rise to glycoprotein hormones, which includes TSH, that is thyroid stimulating hormone. Other than TSH, there is follicle stimulating hormone FSH, LH, that is luteinizing hormone. All these are the examples of glycoprotein hormones. And lastly, there are some amine hormones which are water soluble, which includes your stress hormones, that is epinephrine, norepinephrine, and the other one is dopamine. So this is one class of the hormone on the basis of the chemical nature. The other class is lipid soluble hormones, which includes your thyroid hormones, including triiodothyronine, that is T3, and tetraiodothyronine, that is T4. Then nitric oxide, about which I have just mentioned, it is also a lipid soluble hormone. And then comes your steroid hormones, which includes the male sex hormone, that is testosterone, the female sex hormones, that is 17-beta estradiol, progesterone, and others like cortisol. They all are steroid hormones and are lipid soluble hormones. Now, let us have a look at each of these in a bit detail. So, with regard to the water soluble hormone, we first saw that we mentioned about the eicosanoids. So, eicosanoids are basically, you can see in this figure, the eicosanoids basically includes prostaglandins, and there are thromboxanes. Prostaglandins are in turn of further several types, including PG, F, PG, G. There are different prostaglandin E. All these prostaglandins, leukotrienes, thromboxanes, they all get derived from the arachidonic acid. We will learn about their physiology as and when we will talk about the specific gland in our series. Then we have talked about the peptide hormones, again a water soluble hormone. So here you can see a structure of one of the peptide hormones, which is oxytocin. So oxytocin is a nonapeptide. Nonapeptide suggesting that it is made up of 9 amino acids, as you can see here as well. Then you have protein hormones. Here you can see the structure of insulin. So there are 2 chains, A chain, B chain, both of them linked with the disulfide bond. So this is insulin, which is a protein hormone and water soluble. And then we have talked about the amine hormones. Now you need to pay attention here that among the amine hormones, which are basically, you see, catecholamines, these are derived from tyrosine. So these catecholamines include dopamine, norepinephrine, which then gets converted into epinephrine. All these are derived from tyrosine and hence called as amine hormones. On the right panel, you can see that tryptophan, another amino acid, gives rise to melatonin, which is a hormone playing major role in regulating the biological clock, biological rhythms, our day to night rhythms. But here you can see that even thyroid hormones have been kept here. So thyroid hormones are derived from tyrosine and hence called as amine hormones. They are categorized under the amine hormones. But we must keep this thing in our mind that these hormones are actually lipid soluble. So here the structure of triiodothyronine is shown, wherein it is to be kept in mind that these hormones will not get dissolved in water. Below this, you can see the structure of aldosterone, which is a steroid hormone and is again lipid soluble. So what you need to know at this point of time is that there are several steroid hormones about which I have just mentioned. So all these steroid hormones, which you can see here also, aldosterone, cortisol, testosterone, 17-beta estradiol, all the steroid hormones, one thing is common in all these structures is the basic ring. You can see that there are these 3 ringed structures and then there is one pentagonal ring. All these are actually similar in this sense that they share a common nucleus, which I have just shown is made up of these 3 cyclohexanes and 1 cyclopentane. This is what is referred to as a steroid nucleus and is also called as cyclopentanoperhydrophenanthrene nucleus. We will also take up this entire synthesis of the steroid hormones when we will talk about them in much detail. But you need to know that all these steroid hormones are derived from the cholesterol, which is a 27 carbon containing compound. So this cholesterol gets converted into pregnenolone and then by the action of several enzymes, this pregnenolone then gets converted into different types of steroid hormones. So here in this slide, there are two images. On the left side, you can see an adrenocortical cell, which is actually a steroid secreting cell. So this figure is showing the ultrastructure of the adrenocortical cell. So any steroid secreting cell is abundant in SCR, as you can see here. And then there are mitochondria which have tubular cristae in it. So these are the characteristic of any steroidogenic cell. Whereas if a cell secretes protein hormones, for example, on the right side you can see a growth hormone secreting cell. You can see a number of black spots here. So what are these? These are actually dense secretory granules. So each spot would be having a number of protein hormones inside them. Other than these dense granules, what else you can observe in a protein secreting cell? You will find well developed Golgi apparatus. Other than that, the mitochondria would be having plate like cristae, unlike the tubular cristae which you observed for the steroid secreting cell. So with this, what we have studied today, we have got to know that hormones are synthesized, stored and released by non-neuron endocrine cells. But even neurons can produce hormone and secrete them, and these type of hormone could be referred to as neurohormones. These hormones will exert their effects on the target tissues, which could be far or could be near to them, or even the cell can act on itself also. Then we have seen that hormones are carried in the blood. There are some definitely autocrine and paracrine hormones. What is important is that hormones act at very low concentrations as well. And then we will see that there are some of the carrier proteins which is required for the transport of some of the hormones. And also towards the end of the part, what we have seen that hormones are chemically categorized into two major classes, including water-soluble hormones and the lipid-soluble hormones. So in the water-soluble hormones, we have studied about the eicosanoids, we have studied about the peptide hormones, we have seen with regard to the protein hormones, and for the lipid-soluble hormones, we have seen the thyroid hormone, nitric oxide, and the steroid hormones. So this is what is with regard to the introduction to the field of endocrinology. And in the next part, we would learn about the hormone receptors, in general, how the hormones act. Thank you.